Welcome to the NGO Whisperer Show in partnership with Behenet. This is a show that celebrates men and women from around the world who are making an impact in people's lives. My name is Carolyne Opinde. I am the founder of the NGO Whisperer, a consulting business that helps nonprofits raise funds so they can successfully impact people's lives. Today we are blessed to have Jason Sisneros all the way from Salt Lake City in the United States of America. Jason, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Jason is an established entrepreneur and a philanthropist based in Salt Lake City who is impacting lives of men and women who have experienced gender-based violence in their lives. Not only that, he is also involved in a number of non-profit initiatives that rescues people who have been trafficked. Jason, would you please let us know how this whole began? How did you get involved in the non-profit sector, seeing you are a consultant and also an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. And I think with your viewers and anybody that's watching this, everybody has a journey that they've been on. And mine started when I was a young child. I was adopted by a gentleman who married my mother, and he was very abusive. Broke my nose over a dozen times. And by 17 years old, that's how many times he'd broken it by the time I turned 17, and much other abuse. Threw my mom downstairs. I started stepping in front of her when I was about 7 years old, trying to, protect her and taking her beatings. And that led to a place at 17 where he was arrested and finally put in prison for attempted murder of my mother and myself. So I grew up in a really abusive situation, and then went on to do what I knew. I dealt drugs, I collected money, and if it wasn't for the intervention of some really great mentors, I would probably have died or been in prison, or maybe a combination of both. But went from that, I got into the business world, and sort of straightened my life around because I didn't want my children to grow up in that same environment. And so I went from that, I went into business. I failed a few times, learned a lot of great lessons, and then got around some really great business people and learned how they approached business. And then was able to become successful in my own right, and then started really feeling that pull to want to give back from the path that I had been on. Because if it wasn't for people investing in me, believing in me, there's no way I'd be sitting in the position that I sit today. And so that turned into my very first charity that I got involved with was around the idea of domestic violence. From my beginning, it was very, I think, probably obvious to the world why I would be passionate about that. And then that led into wanting to feed people. And so I was brought into an organization called Feed a Billion, which I'm still the CEO of, that was founded by Tony Robbins and Ambush Jane. And then that led into what I saw as the horrors of domestic violence, of people being food insecure, and then being introduced to the world of trafficking. And I got invited to go on a rescue because of my background. They thought that my experience back when I was younger would help in that arena. And so I did, and it just changed my life forever to see little boys and girls that have had their freedom taken away and then abused over and over and over again. We had one young lady that was sold 4,000 times in 2 years, and it just broke my heart. And so then I went, took that and have supported numerous rescues and been on numerous rescues myself. And I'm really just passionate about it. So then we got into teaching businesses my strategies so that they could make more money, so that they could do more good. Because business owners really do have a heart for service, most of them. And they just want to have the resources to be able to do so. And then I brought the business experience into philanthropy to help philanthropic charities be able to structure themselves more like business so they could be more sustainable. The failure rate in business is about 90% over a period of time, and it's even higher in charities.
Yeah.
So just taking the experience and the life experience and putting that all together and doing the best I can, Caroline.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like you to walk us through how you worked with each and every one of those causes, starting with the prevention of gender-based violence. What is it that you and your team do to help men and women who find themselves in situations where there is domestic violence and they're not able to help themselves to come out? What do you give to them in terms of services and support?
It's a really great question. So my primary charity that I work with in that arena is called A New Dawn. And I've worked with and financed and, donated to numerous groups, but this one's the one that I focused on because if there's one thing that holds all of the charities that I'm involved in, it's that someone's choice has been taken away and they are not in their situation by their own personal choice. And so we want to help those vulnerable folks be able to have choice and to be able to give them an out. And so in A New Dawn, what we focus on there, it's connected to multiple different charities because it's a multifaceted approach. Some people get addicted to drugs, trying to deal with their problem. You've got children involved, you have domestic violence, it's a multifaceted issue. So there's no one story that's the same. One thing that they do have in common is that their choice has been taken away and they're being held prisoner in a lot of ways, even in plain sight. And so what A New Dawn does and what we focus on is giving women that are coming out of that situation a transitional housing opportunity. So in other words,
these are safe houses where you bring these women and their children, probably give them different identities until they are able to get on their feet and continue with their lives like normal people who are not in any situations of domestic violence. Is that what you do?
Yeah, a roof over their head, because a lot of times, women are forced to stay in that abusive relationship for financial reasons, especially women with children. Because there's money coming in, and the man who's doing the abusing just cuts them off from all family. It's again, there's a pattern to it. And so what A New Dawn does is say, here, and then obviously their credit would be shot, or they don't have the financial means to be able to live on their own. And so what A New Dawn wants to do is set them up a roof over their head, job training, psychological training, so that they can get out of that mindset and really just start a new life, right? And Kat Dawn, who's the founder of it, she went through this herself. Drug addiction, spent time in jail, and then was able to straighten her life around. And she used and built that program for other women, and now does just a phenomenal job.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so the next nonprofit that you are involved in that I would like you to talk about also is when you're rescuing boys and girls who have their freedom taken away from them. What role do you play? How does that happen? I know you might not disclose a lot because of confidentiality reasons, but can you walk us through the process of rescuing a boy or girl who has been trafficked?
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the people that are buying these children have white skin, and they're flying into foreign countries and they're doing this kind of thing. So one of my roles has been is to go undercover as a buyer. And I've been able to do less of that lately because of my profile and bringing this stuff out. But you go in and you pose as a buyer, and then you set up the whole scenario, and then we coordinate with the foreign governments to be able to bring them and get them involved, and then be able, again, I'm being very careful of how I talk about this, but that's the general scenario. And there's multiple different organizations that I work with. The one that I'm highlighting these days is called CERT Ministries, S-E-R-T Ministries, out of California, Pastor Rudy. And a lot of times it's men and women who've seen this either out of the military or with their the different law enforcement entities, and they gather around because it's very few people are doing anything about it. And so rescue is part of it, and then there's rehab afterwards to be able to help them straighten out their mindset, get off the drugs that they've been forced to take, and job training and getting them back into the world as a functioning human being after their torture and their imprisonment. So that's the general overarching concept behind what we do in the rescues.
So when you do the rescues, and I know you cannot mention countries in this case, but could you give a rough estimate and say we've done this in Africa, Europe, or you can just roughly mention the region so people understand the scope of your work?
Yeah, it's Middle East, it's Asia, it's Africa, it's here in the United States, Haiti. There just been different places that we've been, and it's all over the place. Wow. Many countries.
Wow, it's so interesting to know that this is not a problem of some other places. It's happening right under our noses, and the house next door could be housing people who have been human trafficked, and you might not even know it in your neighborhood.
Right.
That's what I have come to find out. Thank you so much, Jason, for what you do in rescuing boys and girls who had their freedom taken away by human traffickers. What I have learned in my experience in the nonprofit sector and speaking with different people who work with nonprofits that are rehabilitating people who are previously human trafficked is it can happen anywhere, and sometimes places that seem like Airbnb are used by human traffickers to hold boys and girls or even women for a while before they are taken out of the country. That is the little that I've known and the little experience that I have had in terms of listening to someone who has experienced this. So my question to you is, when you're going out to rescue, and I know you go undercover as a buyer, what are some of the things that you have noticed with the traffickers that you can share with our audience for them to be careful when they're engaging, whether it's happening outside, whether it's children, men, women, or in nightclubs and so on? What are some of the things that you could tell people to watch out for?
It's a great question because you have to remember a couple of facts. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. And part of the issue that we're trying to address is the enforcement. In some countries, having an ounce of cocaine on you serve a harsher sentence than if you have an ounce of cocaine than you do for trafficking a child. And the other thing is that once you sell your cocaine, it's gone. You have that human trafficking. You have that child, and you can sell them multiple times. And so the issue is we've got to raise the penalties in this arena so that people pay it and have to pay it. And the second thing is just pay attention, right? Pay attention to your children. Keep a closer eye on them. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. You have to deal with the society as it is. And it is going on underneath people's noses. I mean, the scenarios that we've been in, it's shocking to me that more people that I've seen, they're just too busy looking at their cell phone. They're not paying attention to anything around them, and they're not keeping an eye on their environment. And so that's the big reason why I have decided to use my platform to raise awareness, is because it can happen to anybody. Absolutely. It would happen to right here in the States. You just the other day, 14 years old, snatched off the road, from a little girl that was just walking down the street. And so they're getting more brazen as the pendulum is swinging for enforcement and for penalties and sort of those things. And it's happening. The penalties are becoming worse, but not fast enough for me. And that's why I'm glad we're talking about it today, so that people can just pay closer attention and push their local governments, wherever you are in the world, push your local governments to increase the penalties for when these people are caught. But it is, to your point, it's happening everywhere. And unfortunately, it obviously it scales all, income levels, but obviously it's the wealthier that you are, the more you think you can get away with different things and so on and so forth. So it's just happening everywhere, and you just have to keep your eye open. And as they say, they brought this up in the United States to pay attention to terror. But if you see something, say something. And that's really all of our role, is to be more aware and to say something when we see something that is out of the ordinary.
Absolutely. Earlier, before, we interviewed someone who's developed an app that helps people to be safe wherever they are, and for people to have guardians on their phones, and to be able to just at the tap of the SOS button on the phone to be able to alert people where they are. And I believe those kinds of technology and apps that are being developed right now are really useful to have for people, no matter what the situation is. If you feel you are in danger, whether it is perceived or it is real, that people can really seek for help. And I found that to be really interesting kind of model that he has developed all the way from Australia. And I'm excited at what Jerry Fasoon has done, and I will share his contact with you. It's really amazing. Another work that you do within the nonprofit sector is really training nonprofit executives and managers to run their nonprofits well, and you're partnering them with businesses and consultants. How do you go about this?
Well, it's a great question, because again, my experience and background is in business. I built up a private equity business, and then we got into the consulting world, and really it's all tied together. And then that led into, as I was donating, or if I got asked to be on a board, I was seeing that the infrastructure for a business, because the people that go into philanthropy have just such a giant heart, and they think, of course everybody wants to rescue children. There's 2 million underage sex slaves in the world. Of course everybody wants to feed people. There's people that are dying every 4 seconds from starvation, not from starvation related issues, but from starvation, not having enough food in a world that can produce plenty of food for everyone. It's a distribution issue, right? For every 11 minutes, there's a domestic violence occurrence. And so from all of that perspective, I got in and I saw, look, there's so many people that are trying, but they become constantly involved in raising money, as opposed to sometimes they've got different things that they can do that's a for-profit side that would feed the nonprofit. And really just looking at it to summarize in a new way. Right? So if 90% of these things fail over a period of time, how could we get that down to 80? Because more good people doing good things for a nonprofit perspective is a good thing. And so we just started helping people. We don't charge anything to do these. We, on the training side, and we really just wanted to add that extra business perspective to people who think that nonprofit is not there to make money. Money is a resource. It's not the end all be all, and it's not there to pay the people that are working. It's paid. The money comes in to do the good work that you want to do. And people forget that, right? They think that they have a different perspective on it, and then they get into raising money constantly, and they get upset with it, because that's not what they ever wanted to grow up to be, was a salesperson or somebody that was raising donations. Yeah. But it's part of the game. It's at least 60% of the game, unless you have something else tied to it. And so we just really wanted to teach some of the basics, the business basics, around how you can build a sustainable model.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is one of the most brilliant thing you can do for the nonprofit sector, is to teach them how to run the business, which is the nonprofit really, in a more sustainable way. Because as a fundraiser, as someone who has raised over 100 million US dollars for nonprofits operating in Africa and with offices in the United States and in Europe, what I have come to see is the funding is dwindling and the pool of donors is really shrinking. And donors are asking nonprofits to build partnerships with corporations, with businesses, and with government to be able to subsidize and leverage the percentage of funding that the donors are bringing into the organization. So public private partnership is now a common thing in so many nonprofits. However, most of them do not know how to do this because they've been used to getting funding directly from philanthropists, from funding agencies, and now people like you coming in, teaching them the basics of running a business sustainable is quite amazing, you know?
Yeah. It's just another way to give back. And again, it's been my entire adult life has been learning about business and failing in the beginning, learning from people that were great, reading, educating myself, and now being able to pass that on to people that are doing great work. But if you are running a charity, that public, you know, to be able to sit down with, let's say, a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or, you know, any business that's in your local environment, you've got to be able to talk the way that they talk. Yes. They think in terms of outcome. They think in terms of profit. They think in terms of accomplishment. And most philanthropic entities, they don't speak in that language. Business speaks the language of numbers, and charity speaks in the language of the heart. And they can be combined, but you have to be able to speak on the philanthropic side to the business owner's outcomes, because they may have a heart for it, but they're also looking for, if I put $1 over into this charity, is that going to raise awareness? Is it going to solve an issue in my backyard that would bring more people to move here? Is it something that will bring more awareness to the business so that we can have more customers? That's the way that they're thinking. And so you have to speak that language, because everybody, you know, again, when you have governments that misspend the tax money that's taken, and you have charities that don't know what they're doing with the funding that they have, it really sets people back that can support you into a place of doubt. If I give my money here, is it really genuinely going to produce that result? And so you have to speak to that. If you're running a charity, you have to speak to their concerns. Absolutely. And whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's rescuing children, you should know your number. 2 million underage sex slaves being traded every year. Then our objective would be to knock that down in half in the next 3 years. And here's how much money we're going to need to be able to do that. And that's a conversation that is valuable, especially in the business world, for them to be able to know that their dollars are making the impact that they're looking for.
Absolutely. And that is what we are all about, making an impact and having the numbers. And within the nonprofit sector, as I know it, having worked for over 15 years, is ensuring that your monitoring and evaluation is really up to par and responding to the needs of the donors as well as the governments, and being compliant to any regulations that have been put there for you to implement the project. And those comes in terms of having a certain number of people, having reducing percentages, whether it's poverty, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's reducing hunger, and, you know, elevating knowledge in terms of, you know, elevating people from poverty and helping them really to live above the dollar a day, and those kinds of indicators that are set by organizations such as World Bank, WHO, United Nations, and so on and so forth. And so I agree with you 100%. Lastly, I would like you to let us know how you go about the feeding program. Do you bring food together? Do you bring nonprofits together, give them funding? How do you go about it?
Yep. Essentially what we did was we got in and in that arena and we said, do we want to really be another entity that's just feeding people and competing? And that's another big issue in charity is that, you have within a 5 or 10 square mile, you have multiple charities that are doing the same thing. And they don't talk to each other because they're in fear of, well, that guy, if he comes over here, he's going to get my donation dollars, and then we're going to be in trouble. And so the idea is to get them in a cooperative position. And so what we did was we looked at the world and we said, who's doing the best at distributing food at the lowest price and the highest level of efficiency? And then we would raise the money and have it be a pass-through because, again, in Feed a Billion, none of the executives take any pay. If we fly somewhere, we pay our own way. We don't get paid for the work that we do in the charity. What we really wanted to do is to be a pass-through for these entities that we discovered. We work in Africa, we work in India, we work here in the United States, and in the food distribution area. And we found some really great operators that know the local markets, that know how to bypass some of the I want to be very careful about how I say this, but some of the local governments who are using food as a control mechanism.
Yeah.
And really that's what we did. We did that research. We found some of the greatest operators around the world, and that's who we resource in Feed a Billion.
That's absolutely wonderful. So from rescuing people to feeding the hungry all over the world, to training executives within nonprofits to run their business sustainably, and to rescuing people who are in domestic violence situations. You are just one person making a difference in so many ways, and a good example to what a philanthropist and an entrepreneur who has been blessed can do as you impact lives of people. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor to have you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for the work that you're doing, and anything that we can do to support you, we're all in. And thank you, Caroline. Appreciate
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Jason Sisneros, all the way from Utah, Salt Lake City in the United States of America. If you would like to watch this video and many others like this of men and women from around the world who are impacting lives of people, you can go to our website at Behenet or the NGO Whisperer website. Thank you so much, because it's all about connecting people, raising funds, and impacting lives.